At a school, our main character, Genta, is watching a commercial about a place called Dead Man Wonderland, which translates to the Wonderland of the Dead. His friend, Mimi, asks what he's watching, and he explains that it's a prison that the entire school is soon visiting. What kind of school would take students on a tour of a prison? It's because the prison is set up like an amusement park, and everyone in the city has lived there long enough that they want to visit the countryside. However, Ganta, who grew up in the countryside, doesn't want to go back there at all. Their close friend then arrives and complains to Ganta for standing him up yesterday. Basically, Ganta didn't bother waiting because the guy overslept. The three friends aren't really concerned about the destination, as long as they get to go together. When the bell rings, they return to their seats, but suddenly Ganta hears singing, and a highly dangerous figure appears outside the window. This figure flies up to their third-floor classroom and launches an attack, sweeping through the room. Ganta is knocked unconscious, and when he wakes up, he finds himself in a blood-drenched scene. He spots Mimi and tries to ask her a question, only to realize that the figure is holding her severed head. The attacker notices Ganta, approaches him, and stabs him in the chest. When Ganta regains consciousness, he finds himself in a hospital. The police come in and accuse him of massacring 29 students. Ganta is utterly confused because he's clearly a victim himself. The news reports that 29 students were killed, and the police have decided to arrest the only survivor and the only witness of this incident. Truly, the Japanese mentality is incomprehensible. Surviving something horrific is considered a crime. A lawyer arrives to meet with Ganta and takes him away. Ganta claims that the man in red was the true culprit, but no one believes him. He tries to show his own wound, but there's no sign of it anymore. The lawyer thinks he's still in shock and promises to do his best to help him. However, in court, Ganta is sentenced to death. He is taken away in shock, and once he realizes what's happening, he declares he's innocent. The parents of the victims rush out to beat him, accusing him of lying. Mimi's father punches him, and Ganta's phone falls out, revealing a video. It shows Ganta smugly talking about how, as a minor, he isn't worried about the legal consequences and that he hid the weapon, only planning to reveal it once he's free. It's a clear setup, but no one believes him. The lawyer also tells him that there's no chance of appeal and walks away. Ganta is utterly helpless. Meanwhile, at the prison amusement park, a girl dressed entirely in white is singing and suddenly senses Ganta. Ganta is now being taken to Dead Man Wonderland. Years ago, Tokyo was hit by a massive earthquake, causing significant destruction. This prison was built to attract tourists and help revive Tokyo. It's also Tokyo's only private prison. As soon as he enters, a warden named Makina introduces herself. Seeing Ganta's meek behavior, she assumes he's trying to repent. She explains that this place is a business with its own rules. They make money from prisoners' performances. The collar around his neck has all the tools to control prisoners, from electric shocks to location tracking. A young man pushing a cart bumps into Ganta and helps him pick up his belongings, but Makina orders him to return the item he just stole. He feigns innocence, but is swiftly slashed by Makina. Medical assistance is called in urgently, while Makina steps on the prisoner's head, coldly stating that reality, just like this prison, is inescapable. At this moment, the lawyer visits Makina and insists she executes Ganta as soon as possible. She doesn't understand why he's in such a rush, since Ganta is destined to die eventually. He replies that he simply hates waiting. As Ganta is working, he remembers his friends, and with the weight of his reality, he wishes only to die. The pale girl then jumps down, saying that if he wants to die, she will take his life. Ganta dodges her, making her curious and convinced that he's lying about wanting to die. He notices her resemblance to Mimi and asks who she is. She believes she and Ganta are friends, which confuses him since he has no idea how she knows his name. He begins to wonder if he really killed his friends, but he's certain he would never do such a thing. Suddenly, some prisoners who recognize Ganta show up and start causing trouble. The girl tries to protect him, but gets hit on the head with a shovel. Ganta tries to defend her, only to get beaten by the group. The lawyer, aware of the mysterious figure Gonta encountered, remarks that Gonta is both lucky to have survived and unfortunate to have met such a person. At that moment, Gonta begins to feel a pain in his chest. Suddenly, a bomb explodes above him, causing a massive sphere overhead to fall towards him. Determined to protect the girl, he realizes he must live to find and seek revenge against the man in red. The pain in his chest releases a sudden power, giving him the strength to shatter the giant sphere as it falls. Meanwhile, a death row prisoner takes a hostage, prompting Makaina to intervene. The prisoner demands a particular candy, but Makaina, aware that he only has seconds left, disregards his demands. Suddenly, blood flows from his face, and he collapses. The collar detaches, revealing that every prisoner here is given this candy as a necessity. Gonta, realizing he survived, hears the girl mumbling in her sleep, revealing her name as Shiro. She is overjoyed to see Gonta again, and he decides to consider her a friend. That evening, Makaina reviews Gonta's incident earlier in the day. The bomb was orchestrated by the lawyer, though the fact that Gonta survived intrigues him, even though 3 other prisoners died because of it. Makaina wonders what makes Gonta special. Later, Gonta goes to the medical office for a checkup, where the nurse asks if he's eaten his candy yet, but he has no idea what she's talking about. The guy who bumped into Gonta earlier confesses that he accidentally took Gonta's candy, leading to Makina's punishment. He tells Gonta that this place is merciless, and there's no escape. To survive, one has to obey every rule, no matter how absurd. Just then, Shiro appears and invites Gonta to play. The guy realizes she's referring to the dog race, a contest organized by the Prison for Prisoners, held under the guise of voluntary participation. This event provides income for both the prison and the inmates, with rewards in a unique prison currency. If Gonta wins, he could buy food and anything else he desires, or even save up to reduce his sentence. Though unsure of his chances, Gonta agrees to go, mainly because he's hungry. As Shiro leads him to the race, they run into Makaina, who warns him to read the rules carefully if he wants to survive. The guy then contacts the lawyer, Tamaki, to inform him that Gonta is participating in the dog race. In the locker room, Gonta begins looking over the rules when the same guy approaches and introduces himself as Yo. They agree to be friends, but just then, a feared prisoner named Kuzugi shows up. When people see him, they back out of the race. He's a former Taekwondo gold medalist and 2-time martial arts champion who lost his career after assaulting someone for not giving him an actress's contact number. He notices Gonta is new, so he punches him for not bowing. He then throws Yo to the ground and stomps on his hand, warning that anyone who drops out could cause the race to be cancelled, which he won't allow, as he's determined to win the prize money at all costs. In this prison, he claims he is the law, second only to the guards. Kuzugi then grabs Gonta, demanding he smile. When Gonta forces a grin, he gets another punch. Shiro arrives with a pastry for Gonta and steps on Kuzugi's foot, which infuriates him. He raises a fist to punch her, but Makaina intervenes, delivering a light slash to warn him. Kuzugi, intimidated, backs down. Yo is escorted out, escaping the race, while Shiro hands Gonta the pastry. But he's still dazed and doesn't eat. Gonta then reviews the rules and discovers the collar injects a poison at regular intervals and the candy acts as the antidote. Without candy, he'll die in 3 days, and each piece costs as much as the prize for winning a single race. If he doesn't win to secure his next candy, he's certain to die. The lawyer, seeing that Gonta has joined the race, decides to raise the danger level to the highest and instructs the cleanup crew to get ready. Since there are children in the audience today, he wants to ensure everything appears to be well managed and to assure the spectators that it's all just an act. At the first obstacle, a rotating axe, many prisoners lose their lives. Those who stray off the path are immediately shot dead. The audience still thinks it's all special effects, but even if it's real, they don't care because these are death row inmates. The second obstacle is the bungee jump. If a participant chooses a rope that's too long, they'll fall straight into the ground. Shiro jumps with Gonta, and he's lucky enough to get a shorter rope, while Shiro manages to land on her own. The third round is a rain of arrows. Getting hit means death, and falling into the electric pit below is also fatal. Kuzugi uses his followers as shields to get through, while Gonta continuously receives Shiro's help. Narrowly escaping several times, crossing the acid swamp by stepping on floating balls, Gonta once again reaches safety thanks to Shiro. She explains to him that if he doesn't want to follow the rules here, he should follow his own principles instead. With renewed determination, both Gonta and Shiro work together to clear the next obstacles, finally reaching the final stage, where he has to face off against Kuzugi. Kuzugi admits that Gonta is tougher than expected to have made it this far. The rule of this round is survival. The ground will continuously fall, and the last one standing with the ball wins. Gonta manages to grab the ball, making him Kuzugi's target. As the floor drops away, Gonta is isolated with Kuzugi. Recognizing him as the infamous high school killer, Kuzugi starts taunting Gonta, who becomes furious and throws the ball at his face, which Shiro catches. Gonta declares he'll now follow his own rules, challenging Kuzugi to come at him if he dares. Gonta successfully dodges, positioning himself in a corner where Kuzugi can't reach him. Suddenly, Shiro falls and Kuzugi, seeing a red streak in front of him, tries to run to safety but fails and falls. Shiro manages to hold on and tries to throw the ball to Gonta just before the tile she's holding onto falls. Facing the choice between the chance of winning and saving Shiro, Gonta decides to grab her hand instead of the ball. With no winner, the audience is enraged. While Gonta, knowing he's lost his chance to earn the antidote candy, has no regrets about his choice. Later, Lawyer Tamaki is chastised by his counsel for causing so many inmates to die, as yesterday's dog race was essentially a public massacre. However, he silences them and insists they continue funding the prison since it's the place where they're holding the Red Man. Meanwhile, Gonta eats pastries with Shiro, thinking today might be the day he dies from the poison. Several inmates feel lucky they didn't join the race yesterday. Yo overhears everything and starts feeling that everyone around is being dragged down because of Gonta. Believing he's about to die, Gonta writes a farewell letter, which also serves as his last will, addressed to Mimi's father. Suddenly, Yo shows up, telling Gonta that they've been assigned to the same cell. Yo returns Gonta's candy, which saves his life. Yo warns Gonta not to forget this favor, as it costs a lot of blood to obtain it, and he doesn't understand why the warden is so interested in Gonta. The warden has even granted Yo certain privileges to monitor Gonta. Watching Gonta struggle to eat the medicine, Yo takes him out for a meal. Meanwhile, the warden hears that the Red Man has breached the security system and escaped. As Gonta and Yo enjoy some ice cream, Yo pays for the treat. And Gonta doesn't have to worry about money. Seeing Gonta's kindness, Yo begins to question if he's really the one who killed his classmates. As Gonta eats his ice cream, he reminisces about old times with his two friends, recalling it as the happiest period of his life. Suddenly, the clock chimes, and Gonta feels a pain in his chest. The Red Man appears once again, creating a whirlwind capable of slicing through everything in its path. A few inmates suffer the consequences, and when Gonta sees Yo get injured by the vortex, he becomes furious. Determined not to let his friends be taken from him again, Gonta stands up and unleashes his power, attacking the Red Man with a direct hit to the head. However, the Red Man remains completely unscathed, simply smirking as he walks away. Gonta, exhausted, can't muster the strength to follow. The warden, seeing Gonta's true potential, is thrilled that he's finally found what he's been seeking. Meanwhile, Yo realizes that bizarre and monstrous things are piling up, and he begins contemplating whether he should pull out of his deal with the warden. Gonta later regains consciousness and finds Shiro. He thinks he's dreaming, but nearby wounded inmates assure him it's real. He realizes that the Red Man is also imprisoned here, and that he's managed to unlock a power similar to his. This proves that saving Shiro before wasn't an illusion. Gonta overhears a few others saying that the Red Man had appeared a few years back and is currently being held in solitary confinement in Block G. Gonta deduces that Block G is where he'll find the one who killed his friends. Makaina, meanwhile, knows nothing of what happened and only hears from the warden that terrorists have caused chaos. She suspects he has ulterior motives, but believes it involves Ganta. Suspecting he possesses a powerful weapon, she then orders Ganta's capture, directing her men to take him alive. She also enforces solitary confinement across the facility and brings out a dangerous weapon, one that was last used 4 years ago to subdue a dangerous criminal, costing 24 lives in the process. Now it will be deployed again. She summons all inmates back to their cells and orders Ganta to report. If he resists, they'll use force. The warden calls Yo, requesting that he keep a closer eye on Ganta. Yo refuses, not wanting to babysit a monster, but he's tempted when the warden offers him a higher reward. When Ganta hears he's being summoned, he tries to escape, but the emergency doors lock. Yo finds him, and Ganta reveals he's trying to get to Block G to confront the red man who murdered his friends. Yo is shocked to learn of an escapee, especially from a non-existent Block G, since the blocks only go from A to F. However, Shiro knows the way to Block G, but she initially refuses to help out of spite. Right then, a guard robot finds them, identifying Ganta as the target. Desperate, Ganta pleads with Shiro to guide him, and she reluctantly kicks open a vent for them to escape. Just as the robot prepares to fire, the group dives into the vent in time, but they're blown downwards. Even then, the robot doesn't relent and continues its pursuit. Shiro finds a path, but the robot charges straight at Ganta. Fortunately, Yo's pickpocketing skills come in handy, and he manages to disable the robot temporarily, allowing them to reach Block G following Shiro's directions. But the robot soon reappears, and they quickly hide. Makaina, meanwhile, is surprised to learn there's an area in the prison beyond her control. Feeling trapped with the robot still after them, laments that he's dragging his friends into danger yet again. Just then, Shiro charges at the robot, kicking its head and angrily accusing Ganta of not considering her his friend. The robot quickly recovers and Ganta, wanting to save the one friend he has left, tries to summon his power, but nothing happens. Suddenly, a man appears and uses an ability similar to Ganta's to slice the robot in half. This man is the same prisoner who had once been subdued by this robot, and is now seizing his chance for revenge. Ganta realizes that this man is the Red Man and rushes at him, demanding a fight. The Red Man cuts his hand, drawing blood, and uses it as a blade to attack Ganta. Injured, Ganta realizes that the Red Man has transformed his blood into a weapon. Meanwhile, the warden learns of the riot breaking out in Block G. The Red Man taunts Ganta, informing him that their true battle is scheduled for tomorrow. But he'll humor him with a warm-up now. Ganta grabs an iron rod and charges, but the Red Man dodges effortlessly, causing Ganta to stumble foolishly. When he turns back, the Red Man slices the iron rod to pieces, calling Ganta pathetic and boring before walking away in disinterest. Ganta realizes that his power requires blood to activate. Ganta had roughly grasped how to use it, and threw a blood bullet at the man who managed to block it, but his blade broke. He used his body to block, and was still able to completely stop the bullet. He began to change his perception of Ganta. He didn't know anything about the red shirt guy Ganta mentioned or how he laughed, which made Ganta realize he was definitely not that person. Ganta was curious about this power, and the man revealed he was Senji. He didn't need to know who Ganta was, but it was clear Ganta could still use that power. He told Ganta not to think that only he and the red shirt guy had this ability. The area was created to imprison people like him, so Ganta should understand that by now. But now, Senji wanted to continue the fight. However, Shiro suddenly lunged at him, kicking him in the head. He realized Shiro was a girl, and he blushed, feeling flustered. He then asked her to put on a different shirt, as her tight outfit made him feel awkward. Suddenly, both Ganta and Senji were shot with tranquilizer darts by soldiers. When Shiro saw Ganta being hurt, she rushed out and punched the soldiers. They were then captured and taken to the warden. The warden demanded the soldiers release Yo, but the soldiers were confused as to why Shiro didn't have a number. They thought she was a malfunctioning prisoner. Meanwhile, Makaina had people search the area where the robot and Ganta fought, but there was no trace left. The robot had also disappeared, so she immediately knew that the sly fox, the warden, had done something. She then went to find the director of the prison. Yo and Shiro were taken away, and Yo asked why the place was hidden. The soldiers explained that every prisoner here had the ability to control blood and was extremely dangerous. They didn't even know what the true nature of the power was. They then released both of them, but Shiro was told to find Gonta herself if she wanted to meet him. They also took Yo's money as compensation for the damage. Gonta then woke up to find himself on an experiment table. The warden, who was also his lawyer, appeared. Senji was in the infirmary, still nervous around girls. The nurse wanted him to stop the match the next day, but suddenly, he stood up and threatened her, saying no one could stop his match. The warden told Gonta the truth. He had only pretended to be a lawyer and framed Gonta to put him in this prison because he was feeling impulsive. Gonta cursed him in anger, and the warden slapped him. He then paused and informed Gonta that tomorrow he would have to fight Senji. Battles and experiments were an everyday occurrence in Block G. Winning a match would earn a lot more money than a dog race. And Gonta would also receive more antidotes. The warden told Gonta that if he won enough, he would meet the one who had haunted him, the man in the red shirt. He was the most dangerous person in the prison, and the first to possess this power. Gonta swore to kill both the man in the red shirt and the warden. The warden told him to focus on the match tomorrow first. He then showed Gonta a video. Years ago, an event caused a type of parasite to appear. The person infected by it would gain this power. To push the use of this power to its limits, an underground tournament in the prison was established. Seeing the bloody scenes made Gonta scream. He was forced to watch it repeatedly until it broke his mind. In short, if Gonta won, he would get money and candy, but if he lost, he would die. The warden told him that Senji was just a muscle-bound guy, but that didn't change anything in a battle of abilities. Gonta should also rest assured that if he died, he would still have value as an experimental specimen. Meanwhile, Makaina arrived at the prison director's office, but was stopped by 2 guards. The director was not available for visitors and threatened harshly. Makaina didn't want to escalate the situation, so she left. Yo was still angry about losing money, and Shiro just wanted to help Gonta, believing he was very weak. Gonta was then brought to the arena, facing Senji. Everyone saw it as an unfair match between a veteran and a rookie. Senji immediately took out his blood knife, and Gonta had to bite his finger to make blood flow out. He turned and ran, climbing a nearby tree. From a distance, he began to form blood bullets and shot them at Senji. He fired 2 shots, but Senji cut both of them. Gonta had no choice but to create a bigger bullet, but Senji calmly blocked it. Gonta began to feel dizzy because he had been compressing blood into bullets to shoot, which caused his body to lose blood. Naturally, this led to dizziness due to blood loss. He started to stagger, while the warden remained amused. Gonta now had nowhere to escape since Senji had cut down the tree by extending the blade of his knife. Senji continued to attack Gonta, while the nurse revealed the origin of Gonta's enemy's power. It was the shard on Gonta's chest. For research purposes, they needed to dissect him. The warden didn't care, as long as Senji won. He said the nurse could do whatever she wanted with Gonta. By this time, Gonta had been slashed multiple times. Senji realized that Gonta injuring him before was just a fluke, and now Gonta could feel nothing except pain. He recalled memories from the past, and coincidentally, Shiro appeared in those memories. She had liked Gonta back then, even though he was weak and often got beaten by her. What fascinated her was how he always stood back up on his own. At this moment, Gonta stood up after Senji spared his life. He didn't want to lose and die, so he decided to continue fighting. Senji, seeing that Gonta had surpassed his limits, became intrigued again. Gonta fired a bullet to knock down something hanging above. Senji focused on cutting it, allowing Gonta to approach and shoot directly into the old wound, knocking him down. Meanwhile, Shiro and Yo encountered an informant who knew that the person Yo was looking for was in Block G, so they decided to return there. The informant knew the location, and Yo purchased the information. When they arrived in front of the guards, Yo told Shiro to stay silent and make a plan, needing her help. Gonta, now awake, found himself with more candy. He ate it and thought about Senji. He felt Senji wasn't as scary as before and hoped they could become friends. Just then, a screen displayed Senji being punished for losing. The nurse brought over a lottery machine, and when Senji called stop, the machine showed the result for his right eye, meaning Senji would have his right eye gouged out as punishment. Gonta, after seeing this, felt nauseous. Meanwhile, Shiro had broken into the command tower to cause chaos, and Yo was dealing with the guards below. Yo then reported to the command tower that only Shiro was the troublemaker and requested to cut the power. He planned to sacrifice Shiro to make it easier to enter Block G. Shiro, surrounded, remained unfazed. Yo was delighted, but suddenly the command tower was blown apart, and the guards were thrown everywhere. Gonta could not forget the disturbing scene he had just witnessed. While Yo realized that Shiro also possessed monstrous strength, comparable to those in Area G. But Shiro smiled at Yo before passing out. The warden had to go see what had happened. 2 guards at the director's office came to take Shiro away. They saw Yo but ignored him. The guards, while robbing Yo, realized the cards he had might be enough to buy a can of soda. But surprisingly, there was 1,000,000 yen in them. Yo decided he no longer wanted to be involved with such terrifying things. Meanwhile, Gonta, worried about his 2 friends, overheard a man who was trying to take flowers from a girl. He offered his food to the man, who ate both the food and the tray, but still didn't feel full. However, the 2 managed to escape in time. Gonta and the girl hid in her room, and she introduced herself as Mina. She had also seen Gonta during the match earlier and knew he had witnessed the torture. Both of them found the place repulsive. Gonta felt embarrassed when Mina got close to him. She complimented the flowers to change the subject and told him he was a good person. She then showed Gonta her back, where she had a wound. She explained how her father had abused her, and during one of those times, her powers had spontaneously activated and killed him. She was sent to prison, but her brother still believed she was innocent, and was trying to find a way to rescue her. Mina was tired of being there and didn't want to participate in those deadly matches anymore. When she turned to leave, she almost exposed herself, and both of them had to turn away. Gonta then suggested they escape together, as they both had powers. However, he knew that Mina feared her abilities, so he wouldn't force her to use them. Meanwhile, Yo had knocked out the guards. Gonta and Mina were escaping together when suddenly several iron bars fell down and Gonta, in an attempt to save Mina, was injured in the leg. Both of them were then found by the guards, who recognized them and decided to let them rest for the next day's match, where the 2 would fight each other. The warden then told the camp director to stop these pointless fights, but the director believed that, although he said so, he still wanted to watch the spectacle. The next day, the match between the 2 officially began. Gonta thought that they didn't need to fight, but Mina suddenly pulled out her earring to let blood flow and attacked Gonta's leg to stop him from running. She finally revealed her true nature, a sadistic, cold-hearted person. Realizing everything had been a lie, Gonta became very angry and fought back. From outside the cage, Yo appeared and asked what he was doing to his sister. Yo then learned that his sister had powers, but he intended to use money to buy her freedom. The guards tried to drag Yo away, but the warden told them to let Yo into the cage. Mina was surprised that Yo was willing to go to jail for her, but she still didn't change her nature. Yo thought Gonta was a ladies' man, but Gonta tried to explain that he had been deceived. Mina swiftly attacked, knocking Gonta down, and then ran over to gag him. She pretended to be innocent in front of Yo. Gonta was furious and wanted to stab her, but Yo stood in front of him. Seeing Yo's stupidity, Mina wanted to deal with him as well. Yo then revealed that he had known his sister had these powers since that day when he saw their father trying to rape her. Yo had rushed in with a knife, thinking he had lost control, but it was actually Mina who had killed their father. Yo told his sister not to lie anymore, and no matter what she was, he would protect her. However, Mina had no more attachment to her brother. She began torturing Yo, forcing Gonta to fight back. But she used Yo as a shield. Gonta tried to explain that Yo was her brother, but Mina had always despised her family. She knew Yo was like this and believed that when Yo struck Gonta, he must have taken something precious from him. Gonta admitted that it was true, but didn't care. Mina then threw Gonta into a corner. Gonta was forced to retaliate, but he knew she would use Yo as a shield again. As she tortured both of them, Mina explained that she hated her biological mother because when the tragedy occurred, her mother had abandoned her to save only a flower pot. Taking advantage of her distraction, Gonta fired a shot to free Yo, but Mina still had a whip to tie him up. Despite that, Gonta advanced, thinking she was the foolish one, and knocked her out with a headbutt. The audience was upset, saying Gonta's attacks were weak and lacked blood, but he gave them the finger and told them he would win however he liked and ordered the warden to release him. Senji, watching from the sidelines, found Gonta more interesting the longer he watched. The camp director, still entertained by Gonta, called for Shiro to wake up and prepare to make his dream a reality. He told Shiro to eat something, but she was now acting like a completely different person. No longer the innocent Shiro from before. The director started activating his powers to fight Shiro. One attacked while the other dodged. Gonta eventually met Yo, and he apologized for what had happened with his sister. Suddenly, the entire area began to shake violently. Mina's bed crashed into a nearby glass cabinet, causing it to collapse. Mina, now awake, was reminded of the time when her mother had abandoned her. Yo had been the one to save her then, and once again, he was protecting her now. Yo, slightly injured from saving his sister, still didn't hold any anger toward her, but Mina thought he was just a liar. Yo, despite being hurt, told her he wouldn't be angry with her and began to remove the shards of glass from his hands. He noticed she still loved flowers and decided to take her away from this place. If they were to be investigated, he would take the blame for everything. Mina asked him not to think that way, as it wouldn't change the fact that she was the one who killed their father. Meanwhile, Gonta suddenly started having memories of Shiro. Images of Shiro kept appearing more frequently in his mind. In the meantime, Shiro had defeated the director, and he knew that Shiro could never return to the person she was before because she was the one in the red clothes, someone who had been abandoned. During that time, the soldiers were taking care of the aftermath of the recent shockwave. Gonta accidentally ran into Senji and apologized to him for the eye incident, but Senji considered it just an everyday occurrence and let it go. He informed Gonta that his fighting style had too many gaps to be exploited, as he mostly repeated the same move. The two sat and talked about childhood movies. Suddenly, Yo was kicked out of the room by his sister because she wasn't injured enough to not change clothes on her own. When Gonta appeared inside, he was thrown a vase, but he dodged it just in time, causing Senji to take the hit. It was because of this incident that Senji remembered that Gonta's headbutt was quite impressive. Gonta later asked where Shiro was, and Yo informed him that they had been separated when they entered. Gonta then recalled that he had known Shiro before. Back when his mother worked for a research institute where Shiro was, he often visited her to play. But once, when Shiro was hurt from an injection, she started to get angry at him. Gonta, feeling sad, walked away. But then he saw his mother was troubled, and suddenly, a test dog started chasing him. Gonta called for help, and Shiro jumped down from above and tackled the dog. They made up and continued to play together. Yo really wanted to tell Gonta what had happened, but he didn't want to shatter the image of Shiro in his mind. Makaina was furious because the warden had locked all the information about Block G and everything related to the abilities he was researching. She was ready to break the rules to bring everything to light. Meanwhile, the warden had obtained information about the stone on Gonta's body, which matched the one that had parasitized the red coat. And he currently couldn't study the red coat because that person was a toy for the director. He wanted to wait until the director died, then everything would belong to him. Meanwhile, Gonta went to find Yo in Mina's room, but only found her. He asked if she had been punished yet, and she revealed that she had lost a kidney before. As for Yo, he was out trying to reclaim money from the two soldiers who had extorted him. Gonta immediately ran and was knocked out by a girl with powers. Yo encountered the warden again accompanied by a monk with abilities. The boss informed Yo that money couldn't buy the pardon for his sister and that he would soon carry out the punishment on Mina. Yo wanted to do something but was shot in the mouth by the monk. Gonta, now conscious, met the girl again, and she explained that she had only been testing his abilities, which still seemed a bit underdeveloped. Her name was Kara. Another man introduced himself as Nagi, the leader of the underground resistance. Gonta noticed that his voice sounded somewhat mechanical. Nagi's goal was to break the cage that the director and the farm boss had created. They believed that Gonta could help them, and Gonta realized that there were others here with similar ideals to his. However, he wanted to rescue Mina first. Nagi told him to stay for a while. Mina's punishment had come, and Nagi took a chip out of his tooth to send a message to another party. Mina, at that moment, realized she had changed and found hope because of the two of them, but she wanted to face reality and laugh madly like before. However, her punishment this time was just a haircut. Nagi intervened because hair wasn't even part of the punishment in the number-crunching machine. Suddenly, the monk brought Yo back to Gonta's group, and he unloaded his gun to destroy the room. Gonta wanted to rush in and fight, but was immediately blown away by the monk. The monk then pulled out his instrument and turned it into a weapon to pray for Gonta's soul. Suddenly, Shiro jumped down from above and broke his instrument. She continued being Gonta's superhero and came to save him. Yo realized he had almost forgotten the real monster. When the monk saw Shiro, he decided to leave. Another resistance fighter, Rokuro, returned and was the one who had just saved Mina. The entire resistance group then gathered to welcome the newest member, Gonta. Seeing the whole group made Gonta feel a bit happy because they were all cheerful and friendly people. Later, Nagi made something for Shiro to eat. Someone asked Shiro why she was in Block G, if she wasn't a person with abilities, and she replied that she had always lived here. Meanwhile, Makina revealed that inspectors would soon arrive to observe the place. She believed that at that time, she could force the warden to confess everything he was hiding. Nagi's soldiers also set their plan to coincide with the inspection, assuming that the arrival of the inspectors would make the warden act like he had nothing to hide. At that moment, they planned to rise up and create chaos. However, their enemies would be those like the monk they had just faced, people who couldn't be reformed. These individuals would go through a terrible punishment, and those who survived would become the farm boss's servants. Gonta thought that their abilities didn't affect them, so Rokuro reviewed the camera footage, showing that Gonta had simply missed his attack rather than his ability being ineffective. Rokuro called Gonta untrustworthy and useless, which hurt his pride, making him declare he hadn't officially joined their group and then leave. Meanwhile, the warden was thrilled to discover the director had died, because now the whole place would belong to him. Gonta went to see Senji and asked him about the boss's henchmen, known as Takers. Senji was angry that Gonta had fought the Takers without calling him. But Gonta pointed out that he had run into them by accident and couldn't have done anything else. Senji knew about Nagi and shared that Nagi had a grudge against the Takers. 2 years ago, Nagi and his wife were forced to fight each other. Nagi surrendered and was punished by having his vocal cords cut, rendering him unable to speak. However, the warden didn't like how Nagi manipulated the scores, so he punished Nagi's wife as well. The two tried to escape, but the monk attacked them, killing Nagi's wife, while Nagi was left unable to even call out her name. Gonta later found Nagi playing with Shiro and apologized for raising his voice earlier. Nagi explained that while the resistance might seem carefree on the outside, they all felt like they were sitting on a powder keg. He didn't fight for revenge, but to overthrow this place and gain freedom, as he had a child somewhere out there. That night, while going to sleep, Gonta was still thinking about his goal of killing the Red Coat, while Shiro dreamed of going outside to eat as much as possible. However, because she was always eating, she set a new goal, to go to a Ferris wheel. Gonta promised to take her there once they escaped this place. Meanwhile, the monk was still furious at Shiro for breaking his instrument, though a new one had arrived. It was revealed that Rokuro was actually an inside man for the monk. The inspection team had arrived, and would stay for a while. Gonta returned to the resistance meeting room to apologize, asking Shiro to wait in her room because he didn't want her involved in this mission. Shiro was a bit disappointed, so Kara comforted her, explaining that Gonta only wanted her safe because he cared about her. Shiro, hearing this, left happily. Nagi shared that their plan was not to escape, but to expose the cruelty of this place to the world. They immediately put the plan into action, and the control room started receiving alerts. Just as they were about to act, Rokuro and Nagi arrived to confront them. Someone faked a retinal scan to unlock a door, but the bridge would collapse if it exceeded the weight limit. So, one person used their blood to create a suspension bridge for everyone to cross. However, midway across, the bridge began to sag, and a guard robot was deployed to disrupt them. One person was hit by acid from the robot and died. The robot then targeted the bridge with more acid. So, Kara threw a hard drive containing documents about the atrocities here to Gonta, placing her hope in him. She held onto the bridge to allow the others to proceed, even as the robot approached. When she saw that everyone had crossed, she used her blood to form a shield and turned back to fight the robot. She armored her arms and punched the robot's head, causing it to explode. In the end, she fell along with the bridge. Gonta's group managed to cross, but could only hope Kara was okay. Now, they couldn't proceed further because they needed the elevator to work, which would mean that Nagi and Rokuro had successfully taken over the control room. Meanwhile, Nagi encountered a little girl, and he thought she was lost, so he told Rokuro to activate the elevator. However, Rokuro laughed and revealed his true face. The little girl introduced herself as the commander of the Takers Team 3 and pulled out a massive sword. Nagi had no choice but to fight. As he used his power, the girl struck him with her sword. She revealed that this sword could neutralize their powers. Indeed, Gonta's warning was correct, and Rokuro had edited the footage to make them let their guard down. Nagi now knew what he had to do if the plan was to succeed. He managed to use his power again, but just touching the sword would make it evaporate instantly. He knew he had to get to the lever soon. But the crazy little girl wouldn't let him go so easily. Nagi's blood spilled across the room as the little girl decided to punish him using the ancient Chinese torturous method of disembowelment. She kept slashing Nagi, causing him continuous injuries. She repeatedly called herself a lady. But Nagi told her she was just a child because a true lady would never do such foolish things. The girl started to lose her mind and remembered the things she had done because of her mother. She believed that people who did wrong should be punished with pain like this. She then chopped off one of Nagi's arms, but he threw it away and sprayed blood in her face before quickly rushing to knock Rokuro out and activate the lever. Gonta's group was able to leave, but Nagi had collapsed. As everyone went up, they were blocked by the monk's group, and their powers were almost useless against them. Rokuro realized that Nagi had indeed done something incredible by taking down the crazy girl and activating the elevator, but the chances of the hard drive being taken out were almost 0%. However, Nagi still believed in that small chance. Rokuro mentioned that the camp leader had not followed his meticulous plan and kept doing flashy things, so perhaps Nagi's hope could come true. Gonta's entire group had nearly died, and he was the last hope left for them. He was determined to get the hard drive out. Nagi, at this point, took a chip out of his teeth to try calling for help if anyone happened to pass by their meeting room, and luckily, Shiro returned and met someone in the room. Gonta, at that moment, came face to face with the monk. The monk had no intention of killing Gonta, because even if he fought back, it wouldn't hurt him. The monk was called away. So, he would meet Gonta again later. At this point, Gonta still had 3 others with him, and they tried to escape, but suddenly Shiro ran up to them. She asked where the hard drive was, suddenly grabbed it, and threw it into a room that was about to explode. She believed the hard drive was very dangerous, but Gonta knew that and thought she had just thrown away his hope and everyone's. She said she had to protect him, because he was so weak. But he bluntly punched Shiro and told her he didn't want to see her anymore. The resistance team returned to the meeting room, and luckily, Kara was still alive and back. When she heard the story, she didn't blame them. She then wanted to try again, as long as one person could get out and show the inspectors their power and tell them the truth. It would be a success. Kara knew that Nagi was still alive because the monk wouldn't let him die that easily. They would keep trying as long as there was hope. There was still something to do. Nagi was indeed still alive, and the reason the monk spared the resistance group was that he wanted Nagi to join the Takers. Meanwhile, Makina and her subordinates were copying data from the warden room when he and a lieutenant walked in. The lieutenant seemed to know about the camp leader's plan and was the one funding him. Meanwhile, Kara wanted to recruit more people into the resistance. Anyone who intended to escape would do. A few names were suggested, but none were suitable. Ganto wanted to do his best to help, but Chara thought they needed experienced people, and he wasn't what they needed. He felt a bit hurt. Thinking that Chara was angry with him, suddenly, Rokuro showed up and asked who had ruined his plan. Everyone was still unaware that Rokuro was the traitor, so he straightforwardly revealed it, saying the hard drive was actually a bomb. And that by now, they should all be dead because of it, yet someone had ruined his plan. Gonta realized Shiro had truly saved him. Rokuro was now assigned a new mission, while Nagi was still being forced to join the takers. The monk, knowing how much Nagi cared about his friends, threatened to kill each one of them until Nagi agreed to join. The first person Rokuro selected was Gonta. Meanwhile, Shiro was still upset at Gonta for yelling at her after she had helped him. She returned to the director's office to eat cookies, remembering him as she cried while she ate. Gonta also learned that the footage that had initially slandered him was edited by Rokuro. Rokuro sent Gonta to face two executioners. One was a wild beast abandoned in the forest and raised by bears, while the other was a murderer who skinned women to create his art. But just as the two were about to finish Gonta off, his senior, Senji, arrived to save him. Senji asked who the strongest around was, but unfortunately, the two he'd just taken out were the ones. However, the weapons of this group would still nullify Senji's blade. As Rokuro felt pleased with himself, Senji strengthened his arm and released a blade at supersonic speed, making it impossible to block. Rokuro, who had been laughing just a moment earlier, broke into a sweat. Gonta realized Senji was far stronger than him in every way, while Shiro had encountered the person who warned her to rescue Gonta. Despite being injected with numerous drugs, Nagi still refused to join the takers. The monk wanted Nagi to remember what happened 2 years ago, when Nagi went berserk after his wife was killed and came here, brutally murdering 22 of the monk's subordinates. The monk had hidden in a closet out of fear, and now wanted Nagi to reach that level of madness again, so he could belong to the takers for real. The resistance members begged Senji to join them, but he refused, simply because he held no affection for the outside world. He saw both the outside world and this place as equally insane, but here he could confidently be himself, where the strong had the right. That was what he wanted. After Senji left, Gonta ran after him and realized he truly was a pitiful person. He knew his weakness had ruined everything, and he deserved punishment for misunderstanding Shiro. He immediately went to Senji's training room, asking him to teach him how to fight. Gonta was tired of being weak and wanted to learn to fight to save Nagi, to keep Shiro from worrying about him, and, most importantly, to get revenge on the man in red. He wanted to shatter his own ego. Meanwhile, Shiro couldn't understand why she felt so hurt, why Gonta hated her, why the cookies didn't taste good anymore, and why no matter how much she ate, she didn't feel full. The person with her told her not to care about Gonta or those weak people anymore, but she misunderstood and thought she needed to go give Gonta a piece of her mind. At that time, Kara and the others had decided to carry out the mission themselves without letting Gonta come along. They thought he had suffered enough, and this was the best decision. They would now act independently and adapt as needed. Rokuro believed their chances of escape would now depend on whether the takers moved to stop them. But Chara was undeterred. She would infiltrate the takers' ranks alone to stop them. She knew Nagi didn't have a child. His mind had subconsciously created one to give him the strength to keep going. Gonta, still struggling against Senji, was told he needed to learn to control his blood like a part of his body. When Gonta asked how, Senji took out all of Gonta's candy and crushed it in front of him, keeping just one piece. He wanted Gonta to push beyond his limits to earn that last candy. If not, he should prepare for death, as Senji would intercept his blows at maximum speed. If Gonta's blood projectile wasn't faster than Senji, he would die. Suddenly, the person who had been with Shiro approached Gonta to greet him and also to find Shiro. Senji recognized this person and asked where he had disappeared all this time. He said that he had gone from being the strongest to the weakest, so he wanted to ask for some blood. Senji was busy and didn't give any, so he introduced himself to Gonta. He was Toto, and after introducing himself, he turned to leave. At that moment, the warden called the monk and ordered him to deal with some rats. Meanwhile, he had already taken control of Nagi's mind without the warden knowing. Kara had arrived at the taker's location and accidentally ran into Shiro, who was quite drunk, so Kara had to keep an eye on her. However, the monk recognized her voice and exposed her right there. Meanwhile, Gonta had made no progress, but Senji gave up and told him to rest before carrying out the plan with the resistance. He couldn't afford to lose more blood and pass out. He collapsed but still tried to fire one more shot, and coincidentally, the final shot accelerated rapidly as it neared its target. Suddenly, the monk announced that he had captured Shiro and Kara, and that he would let his men play with both of them before dealing with them. Kara told them to continue with their plan and not listen to him. Gonta couldn't stand it anymore and ran off, while Senji hoped he could handle them with the new skills he had learned. Despite the heartbreak of Kara acting alone, everyone had to prioritize the mission. As Gonta ran, he thought he had lost everyone's trust, which was why they had excluded him from this mission. He was caught and suppressed by the soldiers, but Mina came to his rescue. She was just repaying the debt from the previous punishment, and she wouldn't follow him because she still had a brother to care for. She then left. Gonta arrived just in time to save Shiro and Kara, but that was what he thought. In reality, he only knew how to fire accelerated bullets and handle a few soldiers. He was also severely blood-deprived. Shiro ran toward Gonta, but was knocked into a wall by that crazy girl. The monk began to play the harp, and from the room behind, Nagi appeared. Kara was about to run toward him, but he told her not to come closer. Nagi had remembered everything. He didn't have a child. The only child he had was murdered in the womb. He had returned to the mad state from 2 years ago and would make the world feel his pain. He then created blood orbs and made them explode. Nagi kept slaughtering the taker's soldiers. The crazy kid started to fear Nagi, but the monk didn't care because this was what he wanted. Nagi then targeted Shiro, forcing Gonta to jump in and take the blow for her. He wanted to atone for his sins toward Shiro, even though she kept screaming for him not to do it for her, saying that she didn't feel pain no matter what. But he didn't care and protected Shiro at all costs. He tried to reach Nagi, believing there was still some hope in him, but Nagi could only see darkness. Gonta admitted he was just a child and didn't understand Nagi's feelings. But he did understand the sense of loss that Nagi had experienced. But it was also Nagi who had shown him that no matter where you are, there is always light. Nagi then heard the sound from Kara's bell and regained his humanity. He remembered the teammates who had shown him the way. Gonta suddenly collapsed and convulsed, realizing that he was running out of time because he hadn't eaten the antidote candy. Nagi was awakened by Kara, and she helped him realize that he still had friends by his side. However, when they turned back, Kara was stabbed by the monk. Furious, Gonta loaded a stronger bullet and aimed at the monk. This bullet was much stronger and destroyed his ring. He tried to shoot one more shot, but when the smoke cleared, the monk was still alive, only slightly scratched. Kara had used blood to create armor to stop the bleeding, but the monk had purposely avoided her heart because he wanted Nagi to be the one to kill Kara. However, Nagi had returned to his past self and believed that the people who could save him were here. The monk was disappointed that Nagi had lost the demon inside himself, so he shot him in the chest. He then mercilessly shot all his soldiers, even though Gonta screamed at him to stop. A brief biography of this person. As a monk, he had lived in a temple since he was young, and had a cat as a pet. However, 3 people in the temple constantly abused and beat him mercilessly, and the abbot was unaware of their actions. He once asked the abbot for advice, which slowly led him to develop a warped ideology that death might be the salvation for those who have lost their way. On the day of the disaster, the temple was destroyed, and his beloved cat also died. When the abbot found him, he had killed the 3 people who had abused him over the years. Now death, to him, was beautiful. It was his way of bringing salvation to the world. Meanwhile, Gonta was gradually being poisoned. As the crazy girl fled, she accidentally ran into Toto, who killed her with the same kind of blade Senji used. The monk, at that moment, decided he would save everyone until someone came to save him. Gonta was tired of this endless cycle of death, and decided he had to do something about it. Shiro's leg suddenly healed, and she stood up to protect Gonta. But Gonta stepped forward, standing in front of her. Both Gonta and Shiro manifested mysterious symbols, and Gonta's power increased dramatically, allowing him to fire a huge shot. Nagi held the monk in place to prevent him from dodging, and the monk realized that Nagi was the one who could save him. Nagi fired a powerful shot that sent the monk flying into the wall, where he was crushed by debris. Gonta ran to Nagi's side, and Nagi handed him the candy, telling him that he didn't need it anymore. Gonta took the candy and heard Nagi's last words before he passed away. Gonta then went to Shiro, who once again saw the carousel and kept her promise to go with him when they escaped. Gonta also apologized to her for his previous actions. He ate the candy, and it was indeed very bitter, not just because of the medicine but also because of what he had to sacrifice to obtain it. The next day the warden was quite frustrated with how useless the monk was. Meanwhile, Makaina asked if he was upset because someone had escaped, but he tried to hide it from her, insisting that no one could escape from her grasp. She also questioned why Yo and Gonta had been missing for 11 days and returned covered in injuries. She planned to interrogate both of them, and the warden, now the new director, would just have to wait. In the following days, Gonta went up to the rooftop to play with Shiro. She sang a song that his mother had composed long ago. He asked her to stop singing it because the person in the red robe had sung that song too, and he wondered how he knew about it. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to keep up to date with the next episode.